Today, Fraudboxer welcomes a new sponsor, Darwinium. Darwinium brings their next-generation fraud prevention platform that unifies security with fraud prevention to create complete visibility of customer journeys across every digital touchpoint, web, apps, and APIs. Darwinium's unique integration point running on the perimeter edge via CDN brings privacy preservation and low latency, giving a holistic view of customer behavior from pre-authentication through account creation, login, change of details, and even payments. This means businesses are better equipped to separate human and automated traffic while protecting customers from account takeover, identity scams, and social engineering behaviors, blocking content and promo abuse, and of course, fraudulent payments. Please visit www.darwinium.com to learn more today. Direct links will be in the bio of this episode. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Fraudboxer podcast. I have a very special treat for you today. I've got the impossible. I got Brigette Korney here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jordan. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I feel like you're like a myth to get on one of these things. You know, we see you speak on panels, behind closed doors where it's merchants only and those sorts of things. So to have you on a forward-facing podcast where everybody can hear is a special treat. I'm so lucky that you chose mine to be on. I think we're going to have a great conversation today because I think you have a very interesting story and I think you have a lot of valuable information to provide to my audience. So I'm going to pry it out of there. How does that sound?
I will try my best to be an open book for you.
Perfect. Well, we met well over 10 years ago, probably at an MRC, probably at cocktails, probably doing some sort of speaking or something because that's just kind of what we do. We go to MRC, we speak, and then we have cocktails and we have a good time. So yeah, it's probably something in there. Might have been a certified event. I can't remember. Can you even remember?
I can't remember. I think an MRC is probably a safe bet, but we're kind of on the circuit. So we attend all of the good events that are around there,
That's right.
especially to knowledge share, of course.
Exactly. To knowledge share,
Learn more.
not to
Yeah.
see great cities and skylines and have a wonderful excursions and architecture tours. Never those things.
All the
Never.
perks of being a merchant, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, that is a great transition there because you recently have some news about you being a merchant. You were at Groupon for a long time, and we'll talk about that. But you just made a change. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. I started a new gig about 5, 6 weeks ago now. I joined a little company called Adyen. I'm their new global head of risk and fraud prevention. I go way back with Adyen, given my tenure at Groupon. Groupon was one of the first merchants on the Adyen platform, and so it's always been a partner that's been close to my heart. And so I'm really excited to be joining the team on this side, or as I like to say, joining the dark side. I
Yeah.
guess now.
Now you get to buy the drinks.
Yeah.
Now you don't get bought the drinks. So bring that corporate card at Payments Head, by the way.
Yeah.
Now my company is a client of Adyen. I think it's no secret there. So before we go back into your history and we talk about where you came from and all of your experience, how do you officially, according to Adyen, say
Oh,
Adyen?
I I wish that I had that we'd have to get through my thick Chicago Midwestern accent in order to say it like the proper Dutch way. It's a skill that I promise one day I'll be able to share with the masses. But
Please do.
there's a nice thick accent in there that I can't really nail quite yet. But
All right.
maybe we'll have to do a touch base in like a year, and like we'll go through it and
Yeah.
see.
Update.
I'll do it.
How
I'll
to
do a
say it.
tutorial. Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna have to
Excellent.
lean on some Dutch friends to help me.
Well, just tell them that it's coming, so we're gonna need it. But
Okay.
let's go back to how you got into fraud and payments because you have been in this game for a really long time. So how did you do it?
So I think I probably got into fraud and payments the same way that most of us do. We were tasked with solving an impossible problem. And that being, how do we stop fraud on Groupon's platform? This is back in the day, so maybe we're going back to like 2014 or so. So a little under 10 years. Groupon had a small fraud issue, and they needed someone to really help build out what the platform looked like and automate a lot of the functions that we had in place. And so I had a little bit of experience in project management mostly, and took on the role of managing the North America team. And my fraud career kind of blossomed from there. I really think in those early days leveraged the people that I had met in MRC events and different organizations like that to really gather a plan and a strategy for how Groupon could build out a world-class platform. And everything really took off from there.
I think like just so everybody's familiar, Groupon, was a real big thing, quite the storm in like the early 2010s. Even like 2009, I think 2010, 11, 12 in there.
Yeah.
It was like all the rage. It's like you could get your like kickboxing classes with your friends, like buy one lesson, get two people for free type thing. I bought a star one time for like $6 on there. It was there.
I
it was
remember
very,
that.
very, very popular daily deals. Daily deals
Right.
were like the big thing. And then you had X amount of time to redeem these sorts of vouchers and things like that. It's very, very, very of the time and very popular. And you guys were like the name in that. Like everybody, even if like they had bought something from a competitor that did the same thing, they still said, I have a Groupon for this. Like you guys were the actual like word for that particular product. So I could imagine that like with all that at the timing that at the same time with that popularity and this new influx of online purchases, credit cards, new consumers coming into the market. We finally were in Web 2.0 at the time. Like I could imagine like the confusion that people might have with making the purchases, the fraud that came with that, of people trying to resell those things. I could only imagine what came in there. So kind of run us through some of the things that you saw, if you could. And
of course. Yeah, I think like the big thing for some of the biggest challenges that were around in those early days. So I had started at Groupon in late or middle 2010 or so, and started in a sales role and really got to see kind of the roller coaster of the peak of Groupon, a lot of those different pieces. And it was a true story of like working and going as fast as you possibly can in order to handle the growth of a quick growing company like that. I think we were on the cover of Forbes at one point for being like the fastest growing company ever. And that presented a ton of opportunity for people that were there during that time. But Groupon really grew in a lot of ways through acquisition. And so we acquired a company called My City Deal, and that really grew us from just a US Canadian company into the other global regions that they operated in for a long time. And so that was a challenge from a fraud platform perspective. And that was one of the biggest projects I think I worked on while I was at Groupon, was connecting the dots and the back end systems of rolling out like a fraud solution that was global rather than just specific to different verticals in different countries. The other piece of like those early day challenges, I think, was part of Groupon growing by acquisition was through acquiring others. I guess what we would call them like business lines, or I would have called them in my past role. So we weren't just doing that daily deal. When we decided to try and make some of the pivots into physical goods and travel, ticketing, gift cards, all of those pieces, like how do you solve for fraud, not just in daily deals, but in these other lines? And what does your platform look like?
Completely different. Yeah.
So different.
Would you guys, when you would sell direct to consumer goods, would you guys hold inventory, or would you sell it and then like fulfill the orders through the merchant later?
We did both. Wow. We had owned inventory. We had a warehouse at a period of time, all pre-COVID, of course. So we had to have fraud prevention for our owned inventory that we would ship direct. And then we also had ship like a marketplace, right? Where buy through Groupon, but the merchant would ship it out to the consumer and those pieces of it. And so we had to solve for those different types of physical good fraud prevention. We also had partnerships with different other big companies, one of your prior employers, and we would sell and distribute their inventory that we were merchant of record for. So we had to handle the fraud prevention for those types of
and as soon
deals
as
where
they couldn't
maybe
get their 2-for-1 movie tickets, they get all pissed off, and you
right,
guys got to hold the
right.
bag on that one. But
Yes,
trust
exactly.
me, we would get the calls. We would get the calls to customer service when they
Of
couldn't
course.
figure out how to redeem their Groupons to get those
Right.
movie tickets.
Well, and I think like, you know, we can kind of commiserate for like a minute about like how those early days were sort of the wild, wild west in fraud prevention for a lot of like, there was nothing in place to prevent, like to lay out processes for how do you handle those merchant calls that would have, maybe it was our Groupon's fault, but it was coming to you. So like, you know, I think that's a big part of our early, you know,
it's
growth.
always a challenge, like especially doing fulfillment like that or sold by, because, you know, we would give you guys a giant chunk of codes that you guys would fulfill for us. Now, granted, you guys are doing the fulfillment, but we did the supply of that. And at the end of the day, like we could never tell if you might have sent that code to 2 people. You know, we just would never be able to know that, you know? And I'm not saying you guys did, like, don't take it that way or anything. But like a lot of times, you know, again, going back to that time, there was a lot of new people purchasing online. Phones and apps, the m-commerce, as we used to call it, was brand new. And people were buying things thinking that it was something that it might have not been, or they didn't read the fine print because they just saw a good deal, you know? And it's like, at the same time, it's like, it was the fine print on this site that they bought it from, but then they're trying to redeem it on this site that's bound by that fine print. And it's like, there's onus kind of on both for the customer service and customer experience piece of it. But I don't think we had known at the time, all of us, like how to do it. And then you throw in like these whole other, like at the same time, like web forums were still super popular. So people were doing now that's like Facebook mom groups and like local Facebook groups where it's like, okay, there's a deal here, but it was like on these web forums where people, like Slick Deals was a great example.
Oh God,
and they would just rip us, you know? And then it was abuse before we realized abuse, you know, like all of your codes went to one guy that then is sitting on the digital street corner, trying to resell them and make this money. And it got so messy so fast. And like, to your point, like you were saying, is like, you and I can go back and forth, is like, every day was a new scheme that someone was trying to pull on our sites to exploit us. And like, how do you solve for that? Then you need a new tool for this, or do you need a new tool for that? And then to your point, stitching together, like I've been at companies where we acquired things and they have their own payment system, their own fraud tools. And like, we got to globalize those, you know? So, oh man, I'm sweaty from these PTSD right now.
Not even thinking about like, how do you handle the contracting, the commercial aspect of those pieces? Like, if you just think purely product and like what the back end systems, coming from someone, you know, I have no business understanding. I'm not an engineer by trade, but like in the world of fraud prevention, in a lot of ways, you have to act as, you have to understand product from a certain perspective, especially in those kind of early conversations where we were rolling out tools that no one at Groupon had ever seen, and any of those fraud providers before. They didn't know or understand why we needed to send certain amounts of data to build models about fraud prevention. Like the concept of people being malicious on the internet, right? Like just wasn't really there. So having to convince internal stakeholders was also a huge challenge and skill that we had to learn how to do pretty early on and get kind of, you know, master in some ways. I think that was a key part of a lot of the work I did over those years. And that translates now into, you know, my role here. But fraud prevention is like, it's come a long way.
It has. And I think like you and I both, like, you know, we've used similar providers in the past. And we've encountered similar problems. I think like you have a unique perspective on this because of all that we just talked about, where you were also a marketplace, you were also a physical goods. You started out as a digital goods. Did you guys ever do subscriptions?
Groupon has, like, you know, during the years we had a lot of products that, like most tech companies, I would say, we did have a subscription platform for a period of time.
That was very much chasing whatever was hot. Now subscriptions once
Yeah.
again are just like everything. But
Yeah.
that time was very much chasing what was hot. So I think
Yeah.
like with all that you have, like you have a ton of insight. So especially for the position that you're in now, which we'll get there in a little bit, like you'll be able to understand the different types of frustrations that us merchants run into. And you guys have a fraud platform too. I think that there's more fragmentation in the fraud platform space than there ever used to be. It used to be like you were on a Certify, or you were on Threat Metrics, or you were on iOvation or Count. Like that was it. Like you're one of
Yeah.
those four, most likely one of the three with Count, Threat Metrics, or a Certify. But now, like everybody's just all over the map, and they have different pieces for different things. I'm guilty of that, of having like riskifieds in one
Solutions for
place.
different
Like
things.
yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
it's and it's I think it's more than ever. It's become like I've talked about it on other episodes before. It's like you need to try and find what's right for your specific individual need, and there isn't a one size fits all solution like there used to more be. And I think that's freaking out some of the solution providers, as
Yeah.
they're starting to see market share slip a little bit, and they're like, well, what do we do? And I think that they need to understand, like it's not necessarily a bad thing to stick to your core
Hmm.
and like know what you're really good at, and like maybe let some of like the other pieces go along. I mean, you can still be trying to figure out how to make those sorts of things. You should be trying to make those sorts of things. But at the same time, like if you're not good at gift cards, like say I'm not great at gift cards, like go deal out over there, but keep your core business with me, like try not to be a one size fits all. Same thing with like identity and account signups and all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay.
I
That
feel
was
like it kind of mirrors. I feel like it brings up an idea in my head that like kind of mirrors like the payments industry in a lot of ways, right? Like early days in payments, maybe everybody had all of their volume on one provider.
mm-hmm.
Um,
And it was
and then over,
taboo to use multiple. It was like
yeah,
seen as like you were trying to maybe game the system. I
right.
remember like when I was at that same company we were talking about earlier, we had a primary system and we had a fallback system,
Of
and
course, redundancy, right? Is the
yeah,
name of the game at that time.
but
Yeah.
it was, we only ever used it a couple of times, but like thank God we did, because one of the times we had to fall over to it was the Dark Knight Rises weekend, and that was like the biggest thing ever, and like we kind of needed to make sure we were unlocked. But I remember at the same time, like people would always think if you have multiple payment processors, you were probably trying to game some sort of system, get around some sort of limitations. And now like payment
Regulations.
orchestration
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
like everything. Like this traffic from this particular region goes here. This traffic on these types of cards goes to this one. Like
Yeah.
if you're not doing that, like you're leaving tons and tons of money on the table. And I love that the PSPs are like starting to chase that. And I mean, you're one right now, but they're starting to chase that level of sophistication around too, and understanding. Like I just did a big RFP and we had a ton of payment processors in there. You guys were obviously included, but at the same time, like we had some very honest conversations with a lot of the big names where they were very open about where their strengths were and where their weaknesses were. And historically, you would never have that conversation before, but like they were looking at some piece of the business is better than no piece of the business.
You took the words out of my mouth for sure. Like they're leaving money on the table sometimes by not just being strategic and like looking into the data and the numbers on like how can you really optimize where your volumes are going, looking at costs. Look, I mean, we could talk, and I'm, speaking as like an ex merchant, that was a huge part of my team's strategy, was digging into that and figuring out where could we really pick up true, revenue basically. And like that has impact not just like on your business, but also brings you to a seat at the table in larger conversations
Yeah.
internally, right? Like it gets you credibility. It you're no longer fraud teams a lot of the time are seen as like revenue stoppers, but making that shift into a revenue driver can go hand in hand with a lot of these payments initiatives. And we can talk more about that. Of course, I know that's a topic that is really hot for you, but it all kind of is interrelated in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And let's save that for your Adyen part, because we're getting there. We're almost there. We have a couple other bullet points here. There's some things that I think I definitely want to talk about. Like you're very involved in the women in payments boards and all those sorts of things, which I would say that our industry has done a better job than a lot of other industries that I've been in, that to make sure that it's inclusive of, especially of women. That was like a big focus for like the last 10 years. And I would say that like when I started, I've talked about it on this before. When I started, there wasn't as many women. Like you were definitely one of the standout women that was involved in all this. And now I say we have at least a 50-50 spread, across the
It
board.
doesn't feel like that as a woman, but I think we've made huge strides in also hiring in younger female talent that we can develop and kind of elevate and raise through the ranks. I think that is a testament to some of those kind of ERGs I'm calling them, but really they're committees focused on making that a priority and giving back to the larger community in ways that are really important and not just relevant, but like should be relevant and a foundation of
Yeah.
the fraud and payments industry, basically.
Yeah, I was looking around, at the last MRC that we had back in March, and like there's just so many new people that have come into this industry, and
Yeah.
it's the most diverse I've ever seen it ever be. And it's really cool to see, because like I think I talked about one of these things before, is like I used to be like the young guy in the MRC, and now I'm like not, but there's so many like young people coming up behind, and they're really, really, really good, and they're so hungry to learn, and they're
Yeah.
they're doing some really, really, really cool things. Like it used to be like not as technical, like you and I like we're just talking about the orchestration piece of it. It's like that never used to be necessary, and now like the data analytics side of this and getting more granular on how you approach fraud prevention, how you approach chargeback fighting, and how you approach payments is just so much more strategic than it was 10 years ago. That like these new young folks coming in are just like they're equipped with so much knowledge like right from the get-go. It's really crazy to see, actually.
It's exciting too. I think you mentioned like not being the young one anymore. I think somebody had said to me once, like I think a lot of the best parts of some of these, like I know we joke about like it's getting to go visit these different cities, and that's great and as well. But I think one of the other benefits of attending a lot of these conferences and events is meeting some of that younger talent.
Mm-hmm.
And one of like our mutual friends had said to me at the last, like one of the last mags or payments ad, something around the lines of like, I really want you to meet this girl. She's just getting started in this industry. She's just graduating from college, which reminds me so much of you from like 10 years ago. And so it was, I mean, they meant it nice. Like
Yeah.
I'm,
Aren't you
not,
25?
yeah, I wish, but it was a really like great introduction to now make a relationship with someone who is just getting started, and you can kind of, you know, mentor is a word that I think gets thrown out a lot,
Yeah.
and we talk about that a lot, and I think it's important, but I think um, even just building like part of building your network is not necessarily having to find mentors, but just building those connections, because now I know this girl and I can help her and have conversations and not necessarily be a mentor specifically, but have she knows, another person that can connect her to other people
Yeah.
within the industry. So
And that's a good
yeah,
point, because you've been very involved in the industry for a lot of years. Talk about some of your involvement in the overall industry, because like we talk about the companies, and I always have my guests talk about the companies, but you are one of the few people that has a more influential role in the actual industry and the guiding of policies in a number of ways. So can you talk about that?
sure. I got involved. I think it's probably right after my first MRC. A friend came to me and said, "You seem like you really are interested in talking about these types of things, and would you like to join a committee for MRC?" And I I am not the type of person who really says no to a lot of things. I'm always jumping in and saying yes, I want to be involved. And so I joined the conference committee pretty quickly after I joined the fraud industry in general. And I'm now one of the MRC chairs for the US conference committee,
Yeah.
which
I did that
Jordan,
meeting today, by the way.
yeah, it's a
Okay.
commitment.
Yeah,
Commitment
we were going through all the things like that meeting was today. Everybody, we do meet and talk about like what the topics are going to be
content.
discussed.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you scorched somebody on one, and I was laughing so hard. And
Yeah,
it was
it's
great.
important, to give good feedback. And like, I think we forget a lot of the times, like that content is why so many people attend, like
Hmm.
in the sessions that are presented. People put a lot of effort into like putting those presentations together and making sure that it's a really well-rounded and an
Yeah. We
articulate, like
curate this, everybody.
we
Like we are
curate it. Yeah.
curating this
It takes a,
content
yeah.
to make sure there's a mix of both entry level stuff, intermediate stuff, and advanced stuff. I know we get the feedback at the end of the year every year, and I understand like everybody wants more of one type of thing, but we have to remember like this is a very wide encompassing audience that we have to cater to. So it's
Yeah.
just going to be spread a little bit.
Yeah. And it takes a long time, right? You know,
It does.
it took me hours to go through all the sessions. And for Vegas, it's 4 times the amount of,
Mm,
content, but it's worth it in the end. And so I've been doing that for now about 10 years. And that started to open up other doors for meeting and building my network inside of the fraud industry. So, outside of Groupon, figuring out who who can I really learn from? Who do I have maybe a professional connection to that when they need a recommendation for themselves or whatever it might be. It's really been super valuable for me to give back to the community in that way. So
wow.
I was a member of the conference committee for a while and then joined the Women in Payments group, and then ran for the Americas board of directors for the MRC, which I am no longer a member of, given I am now at a solution provider, and I'd have to rerun, but
Yeah.
maybe
And you got to
coming
pay
up, we'll
too.
see. Yeah, that's okay. That's
Yeah.
okay. I think it's valuable, but
I think most solution providers in our space understand the value of being on those boards like that. And I like when I see solution providers on those boards because that means they're mixed in with those merchants that they have to listen to what
yeah,
the rest of us are saying. Because like I've said it a million times on here, is like a lot of these companies are building things like in what they think need to be built. And
mhm.
I think that they need to hear what we would like them to be building and what we need. And I think card network brands are especially need to hear what we want and what we need, because they love to just come up with their own things and act like it's the best thing ever for us when it might not necessarily be. Maybe ask us about it every once in a while.
Yeah, yeah. I hope that now that I'm on the dark side, I hope that I don't get that feedback doesn't stop. People don't want to talk about those things in front of me anymore, because I think knowing, like being an ex merchant, basically, right now, that understanding and knowledge of what merchants really want is, you know, the number one thing that can really differentiate my feedback and my new role.
Before we move on to what you're up to now, is there any other milestones or anything that you were super proud of? Because you were at Groupon for like over 13 years. So anything else that you were like super proud of there, like the feather in your cap type situation?
I think there were a couple of really big projects that we got out the door. But the one that really like immediately comes to mind is the rollout of 3D Secure 2.0 and the preparation and compliance with PSD2. I think not because it was maybe the most intense project that we had, or it wasn't the most, I mean, it was important as a regulation, but a regulatory change, but it was the tie to first how much we talked about PSD2 for years. I feel like I was the constant in every conversation. Everyone wanted to talk about PSD2 and how it was going to change our industry. And I think it did
Mm-hmm.
change it in a lot of ways, but it kind of is like the Y2K moment in my head in a lot of things, like, going back to like
That's a good way to
seventh
put it.
grade, right? Yeah. Everyone talked about the world was going to end, and that's how it felt with PSD2. And then, September 14th rolls around. I know there were a couple of pushbacks and compliance dates, and there was a lot of work done around that. And I think, as an industry, we really rallied together to figure out and make sure that we knew how we were going to handle these changes. But once it happened, I think we saw a bunch of effects that maybe weren't exactly expected, or it wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. I think in some ways it is, but in some ways it has changed how we think about things, but not in necessarily as a devastating manner. The other part that makes it really significant to me is that I was going on maternity leave September 15th of that year. And so I knew I had like this huge deadline, like, can't have a baby until PSD2 and our compliance,
Is
gets
that how
rolled
that
out.
works?
That so I should have named my daughter, something having to do with like the main
PSD2. That would have been
regulator.
a perfect
Yeah,
name.
yeah,
Taking
yeah,
an Elon page there,
yeah, right. But it was a pivotal time, I think, in my professional and personal life. So that's really like the top memory for me.
Well, congratulations on little PSD2.
Yeah, she's
And
old now.
timing
No,
and
she's
timing
4. I
everything,
mean,
right?
yeah, she's
She's 4
she's not.
already?
She'll be 4 in September. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so now let's talk about Adyen. So what's going on there? What are you doing there? What is your responsibility? What does your day look like? And what are you guys doing to change my life as a merchant that gives you millions and millions and millions of dollars every year?
I when I figure that out, maybe in August, maybe next month when we're together doing another session. Can I give that preview away here for us?
You talk about it all day. We got to
Can
get
I
as many
plug
people in
us?
that lunchroom. Yes, do it.
Yeah, plug us. So I mentioned at the top of the podcast that I joined about 5 weeks ago. My role is in the risk and fraud world. My teams are supporting our existing merchants on Adyen's Revenue Protect product. But strategically speaking, I look at my group's function as a way to really educate and consult with our merchants and learn from them and take that knowledge back internally and build out a better product that merchants like yourself, Jordan, can use in ways that are more effective. I bet when you ask me this in 4 weeks that I have a completely different interpretation. I have really enjoyed getting to kind of start afresh at
Yeah,
a
I bet.
new in a new company, in a new role. Everyone has been extremely welcoming.
That's like, can I ask you about that? Because I
Yeah.
mean, this is not in our script, everybody. So I jump companies. I tend to jump companies. I've been at a number of companies over the last 10 years. But with you have been at Groupon for 13 years. And then you join a new company. What mentally, like, what was that like? Like,
Yeah.
because that's a long time,
Yeah. I think there's a couple of points that I make about this when I'm really like kind of pressed on it. One, I feel like I had a bunch of different roles inside of Groupon. So I felt like I'm almost worked at multiple companies during those 13 years, just given our growth, the roller coaster I lived on, basically, and then how my role changed and over the course of 13 years and the things I worked on and all of that. So I feel like I got to experience what maybe I would have experienced outside of Groupon if I had made some of those jumps. The second part of it that I tend to find, like, I feel like I stayed at Groupon for a long time because the culture that was there, the people that were there really fostered like growth for anyone who was willing to put in the work and the effort and like had the talent and the passion and you wanted to learn something new, like it was supported. And so when I was looking for another role, my decision kind of came down to two opportunities that where the main differentiator between them was the company culture. And when I thought about making that transition from somewhere I had been for so long and loved my team so much, and the main decision maker was where was I going to work next? And like, where could I see myself working for another 13 years? What is the company culture like somewhere? And so it hasn't been that rough of a transition because I knew what I was getting into. I knew how great the company culture was at Adyen. And now I sound like I've drank, a bunch of Kool-Aid.
You drank that green Kool-Aid over there.
I mean, it Groupon green, it wasn't hard to change
See, we got a
wardrobe.
favorite color. I mean,
yeah.
But I think like too, if I look back at like your how you were in the industry, you did, since you did all these things like the boards and the committees and stuff, I guess those are kind of like second jobs, at the end of the
Hmm.
day. So you kind of get a different a different perspective there. I will say, like, as far as company cultures go, it is like it sounds like such a buzzword to say when you're switching
Hmm.
jobs, and I think a lot of people, like, they make fun of like Silicon Valley companies that they say they like, yeah, they have like culture people, like they have people that are literally like the chief culture officer that tries to foster a certain type of culture, and they look for cultural fits when they do these interviews with these people. I've done a number of them, but it matters. And like, as much as people want to be like how goofy that is there's a reason that people want to work in Silicon Valley companies versus like working in a steel mill. Like
Yeah.
there's there is not only the work, but like it's the type of thing, like, the people always joke about like, oh, work is family, work is, it's not, it's a job. That's what they always say. But when you feel like you're actually a part of something,
Yeah.
and your voice is heard and your voice matters, it does make a difference. And I think that like pulling people off of their computers into like goofy little games, like we had like a gift. We had the Office Olympics when the Olympics were happening 2 Olympics ago. And it was goofy and it was stupid and it was like ridiculous things like chair racing, but it was so much fun.
Yeah.
And it brought so many people that I don't normally talk to at that company together into our little circle where we became competitive, we became friends, and I still talk to those people. And I think that culture matters more than people realize. And to do my own anecdotal story on this, is in coming out of COVID in 21, I was offered another job at a different company.
Hmm.
Um, about 6 months before I joined iHerb. And I like the people that I was working with that offered me the job. I think that they're brilliant people. I think that they're smart people. And I think that they're still the top of their field. However, the company itself did not really have a culture. And
Mm.
I called my buddy, my mentor, as we were talking about earlier. And I
Yeah.
called him and I was like, hey, what do you think of this? And I was like, this is the role. This is what I'll be doing. This is the people I'll be working with. I was like, I like them. Like, I think they're great. He's like, do you want to work for X? And I was like, no. I just said it like that quick. And he's
Yeah.
like, there's your answer, And
Yeah.
like, and I've talked to people that have worked there since then, like through acquisitions and everything. And they all say like, it's the same thing. Is like, it's the people are great, but it's a head down, do your work, shut up mentality. And that's not really what I'm looking like iHerb has been an interesting one because I joined this company fully remote. Like you already in your 5 works have probably spent more time in person with your colleagues than I've spent in almost nearly 2 years working at this company. I can count on probably one hand how many times I've been to the office at this company. But at the same time, like we get together on goofy little Zooms and things here and there. And we talk. And I feel like with my staff, like I do offsites with them fairly regularly, that like we've fostered a really, really, really good like community with my staff. So my staff trusts me. I've spent time with my boss. I trust him. We've made it work in this new world. But the culture of my company is very is likable. It's enjoyable. And I think that if that hadn't have been the case coming into this, I would be in a whole different place. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel exactly the same. Same way. I echo that. I'm in San Francisco right now. I'm based in Chicago, but I'm here with the whole North America team. And one of my like 45-day goals that I made for myself was to meet with like one-on-one with every single person in my
You do that too,
organization.
huh? I
Well,
I set up my whole first 90
self-imposed.
days.
Yeah.
That's
I
funny.
yeah, just if I could and can, right, I have the ability to be in person and to like get to know somebody, not just like what they're working on and what merchants they're supporting. Like that is very important, of course, but like also where did they go to college? Did they go out for dinner last night with their partner? Or like who are they as a person? Because when I left a company that I had been at for so long, I knew every single person so well. They were my best friends. They were my peers, my employees, my colleagues, like all of those things, of course, but they were also really close friends of mine that I knew about where they were going on vacation, what they were excited about. And that also allowed me to lead empathetically and lead a team based on what they needed rather than how I wanted to lead it. And I think like making that personal connection is the foundation of
Yeah.
being a strong leader in a lot of ways. And so I know it sounds so cliche and,
No, but
dorky
that's
or corny, I should say, but
look at that, the pun intended there.
yeah,
But
I'm a
I mean,
comedian, right?
at the same
Yeah.
time, like, the servant leadership thing is kind of like how I try to do it. It's you just said it. It's like, what is the leader that your team needs you to be
Hmm.
versus how you necessarily need to lead it,
Yeah.
like I think, like, not everybody always fits in. I said it on one of these episodes more recently, that, like, not everybody responds to that well. Like, some people need to really have a lot of hand holding, and they like to be like, well, you're the boss, you tell me what to do. And then if it doesn't fit their exact mold of what they think they're supposed to be doing, whether or not, if they have the full picture or not, they will either push back or go along with it. But with my team, and like especially my team here at this company, is like, I give them the goal. I'm like, this is what we're trying to do, guys. Let's do this. Now, what do you need from me to get it done? And then they say, I need you to go tell this person, remove this blocker, go do this. I might need this computer, I might need this phone, I might need this from the tech team. And that's my job, is to get the tools for them to do their job. Like, I'm technically working for them so that they can do their job. And then when shit hits the fan, then I'm the one that's got to pick up the pieces, at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It also allows you to have insight into how they're working, like the speed that they're working, the progress that they're making without having to be a micromanager, right?
Yep.
You're getting the insights without having to put an additional burden on your team to track it in some certain way or however that might be. I think it's a really important way to, and not everybody is a leader like that, right? And there are great leaders that aren't in this
Yeah.
like specific management style. Um, but for us, right, it's worked out well.
Yeah, and I think, like, I mean, I think it goes back to culture again too. Is like, the people that are in my roles fit the culture that agrees with me.
Yeah.
So like, I kind of know what I get, and like, I have people even here that didn't fit that, and they aren't here anymore. And I had people at Ticketmaster that like didn't fit that, and that's just how it is. Like, not everybody's gonna get it, but the people that just pull back and understand it and just like relax and say, this is what I need from you, Jordan. Can you help me with this? Like, we together we can do great things, take together, and ask questions. Like, you don't have to just like sit there and like fume and be mad if you don't understand something. Just say, like, okay, why are we doing that? And I'm more than happy to explain. I'm a very transparent manager. Like, I tell everybody the exact reason why. So I'm probably transparent to a fault on things, but like, at the end of the day, I think that fosters trust. And and because a lot of managers, and I've seen managers, even some of the people that have come in roles after me, with culture shock on people, like, they don't explain the why. They just say, I'm the boss, just do it. And that is like, especially if it's like a completely like a 180 from how something was done for a decade, like, I'm not saying this is how we've always done it is the right way to do it. Like, I'm always say, like, that might not be the right way to do it, but if you want to change something, explain as to why you're changing it, and make sure that you understand before you change it why it's done that way, and then understand, to like explain to your team why you're changing it, so they get it and they go, oh, that might make sense. It's really
Yeah.
communication, everybody. Communication.
Yeah. I mean, we're solving all the world's problems through communication. No, but
Yeah.
I love the explaining the why, because I think it also pulls out another theme of like when you explain the why, and you as a leader and a manager are doing that, you're also fostering an environment where they can ask the why too and push back, and
Without being scared.
yeah,
Yes.
it's a and ultimately you might end up changing the course of action because you
I've had
have another opinion, right?
plenty of times where
Yeah.
people have come to me and said, hey, I think that we should do it like this. And I'm like, what? I never thought about that. Like, excellent. Like,
Right.
let's go ahead and do it that way. Like, I think probably Steve probably said something this week that we probably did
Yeah.
that. He probably said something today, as far as
I'm
I know.
sure. Yeah. Same. I'm every day I'm asking somebody to give me, feedback, like, being so new in the role, but it all starts at the beginning too. It's a hard, once you kind of have a certain work style in place, like it's hard to change.
Mm.
I think it's possible, but like I think beginning from the ground up with that mindset is really important.
I try to buy and read like these different management style books. Not that I'm gonna necessarily like implement anything, but I'm curious as to like to know like what people are up to, like these radical candor things, or the servant leadership stuff and all that. Like, I think there's bits and pieces that that can be applied to different teams, like I think the feedback, some of the feedback stuff in Radical Candor, like some of it, for example, is like useful when you're more direct to the point, but I don't think you should be an asshole about it, which I mean, the book tries to talk about that. But at the same time, like it's not, when people try to take a single book and be like that as like their gospel, like I worked at a company one time where like tribal leadership, like the book Tribal Leadership was like how they wanted to run their company. And I get like the bits and pieces of like the certain tribes and how they are, but they're like, we have to be this tribe at all costs. I'm like, well, not everybody in this company is going to be this tribe, And I think that like when you try to just shove someone into a very specific mold, you're just going to have a bad time. And like everybody, like I said, like everybody has to be managed different. You need to understand that. And I think that comes back to a great thing that you said about, your 45-day plan, or like, what you do is like when you join a company, you need to have that level of plan. And like there is a book, The First 90 Days. Everybody, if you want to read that book, again, don't take
They
it
need
as
to sponsor
gospel.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Don't take it as gospel, but like it's useful in it because it tells you basically to slow down, and just understand what you're doing and what the company is and what it does and who these people are. The first 90 days, just slow down. Like you don't have to come, like everybody, especially when you come in at a manager level and above, like in tech, like you're not supposed to make a splash your first day. Like you're supposed to like figure it out.
Understand.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the other part that comes to mind when we talk about career transitions is having like this type of conversation, right? Like just with someone that you trust, or professionally, or someone who works as a peer with you. Like, what are some of these concepts that you feel like you naturally lead with, or you naturally embody, or even just as an individual contributor, right? What is important to you? Because I went through kind of that conversation in a couple of iterations with with some friends, and then kind of tied that back to like what we have at Adyen is Adyen formula, and really like figured out what resonated with me in potential new employers. And that was the big driver for me, that like I believe in, like, I'm naturally tying myself to these types of values that the company is also tying themselves to. And so I mean, it all comes back to communication.
Well, how about that, everybody? That was completely unscripted. Like, and I think that was a super valuable conversation that you and I just had. I really enjoyed that, actually. So,
Yeah, I think it was great. Thank you so much for kind of like guiding us to that.
hey, it's all about having like introspection into like what led us to here. And I
Yeah.
think that yeah, I think that was really cool. Like, thank you for allowing me to ask you how you were mentally through this, and for being open with that. I think that our little podcast therapy session here. Well, thank you so much for letting me derail our conversation there and talk about that. I do want to get to the audience stuff, but I think that we are going to save that for something big that you and I have coming up. And it'll give you a little more time to get like more, like you said, to get a little more ingrained in the audience experience over there. So
That
you and
sounds great.
I are going to be at a conference together in the second week of August
Yep.
in San Diego, called Payments Ed. And you and I are one of the featured main stage sessions during lunch, doing another podcast recording live in front of a studio audience. That'll be my first one in front of a studio audience. I've done these live before, but this will be the first one with, I don't know, a few hundred people watching. So
Will they
that
have
should
like
be
a laugh
interesting.
track or something? So like we can make some, not feel so
I'm bringing
silly.
all the
Yeah.
toys. I'll have a whole button up there.
I
I'll be
love
like a
it.
DJ. But
Yeah.
yeah, so let's talk about that, and we'll be touching on things, obviously like 3D Secure, EMV, wallets, probably even faster payments, PSP orchestration, all those wonderful things, just so you know what to take notes on and get some answers for. But yeah,
I will do that.
have you been to Payments Ed before?
I have been to Payments Ed. I believe I was in Washington, D.C. last year. And then before that, I think my first Payments Ed was in Boston a couple of years ago. It's
So
always like really a strong educational event.
interesting. I've never been.
Yeah. Oh, you
So yeah,
haven't?
I've
Okay.
never been. So any tips
Excited
and
for you.
tricks for me, and that my audience that's going can also get out of.
Yeah. I think it's the same things that I would recommend before every event. Like, take a look at the agenda. What are you looking that you need to learn about? What is your role focused on right now? But also, I think Payments Ed might release some of the attendees. I don't remember exactly if they do.
Let me see.
Because I
While you're
think,
talking
yeah,
tips and tricks, let me check.
yeah, no, I just think it's important to know who's going to be there because as we touched on during our conversation, building out your network is one of the biggest ways that you can do that is at these types of events, getting coffee with one of your peers at another merchant that's in a similar vertical, or just kind of like, I think that's really how we fostered our relationship is at these types of events. And it doesn't have to necessarily just be solution providers, though taking those types of meetings, which I think is also important, but make the time and effort to reach out to a merchant who's like you or just a stranger. And I think get coffee with them. And people really are looking for that connection within this industry, and put yourself out there.
Yeah, so it does have the attendees list as far as companies, and there's some good ones on there, everybody. So paymentsed.org, everybody. But I believe they also have the actual sessions, like they have those listed out too of who's going to be like physically doing the sessions. So everybody's there. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to recording live because I've always been on the panels, and so I've never facilitated, and I was really happy that they asked me to do this. I felt very proud that they asked me to do this. But now it's like, and I was like, hell yeah, let's do this all day. And now it's like coming close. I'm like, wait a minute. This is the first time I'm going to be like interviewing a human being one-on-one on a big stage while recording it to maybe, possibly, depending on how our content comes out, be released on the actual channel someday. But for those that are there,
awesome.
You're in for a treat because it's going to be you and I, and it's going to be great.
I'm excited. I think this could be your audition tape for like NBC next, Jordan.
That's what we're gonna. MSNBC is gonna put me on as every night at 5:20 the fraud and payments segment.
Give us
for
5 minutes
seconds.
on fraud. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to have this exclusive with you, and for letting me kind of just talk, which I think it always leads to excellent conversations on here. I think people really enjoy the more authentic, personal conversations that we have that come out of this. Thank you for sharing your story in the industry and just being so open. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. So happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate you.
Yeah, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. I want to thank Darwinium again for being our next sponsor. Their next generation fraud prevention platform unifies security with fraud prevention to create complete visibility of customer journeys across every digital touchpoint. This unique integration, running at the perimeter edge via CDN, preserves privacy while maintaining low latency and giving a holistic view of customer behavior from all touchpoints, including pre-authorization, account creation, login, change of details like email and address, and payments. This means businesses are better equipped to separate that human traffic from that automated traffic that we're always chasing, while still protecting consumers from account takeover, identity theft scams, social engineering scams, and also blocking content and promo code abuse on our sites. Of course, they also detect fraudulent payments. Please visit www.darwinium.com to learn more today. Like I said at the beginning, I will provide those direct links in there. It's pretty cool what they're doing, so I really encourage everybody to go take a look. Again, that's Darwinium. They're great people. Everybody have a nice day. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.